Welcome to the Tesla Economist. Please hit the thumbs up and remember to subscribe. You can also follow me on Twitter and talk to me on Patreon. You might think I'm going a bit too deep into exploring the consequences of the EV tax bill, and I know some of you are getting a bit hasty for some more valuations, but nothing can disrupt business, industry, or economies as much as governments. And this EV tax credit bill is huge. We're hearing it could cost $100 billion, or that it might be limited until 50% of sales are EVs, and then phase out gradually after that. Well, if that's 30 million cars, then that's more like $300 billion, and it could be more. But there is no arguing, $12,500 is an enormous amount to be giving EV car buyers. Anyway, there is this issue of the $40,000 limit on EVs you purchase. Although this has officially only been mentioned for the existing tax credit, and is even non-binding, I thought we should go through the economics to see if it was likely it would be in the new bill, as this price limit would obviously have a huge effect on Tesla. Anyway, how about we start off with a quote from my favourite economist still alive today, Thomas Sowell. "It is hard to imagine a more stupid or more dangerous way of making decisions than by putting those decisions in the hands of people who pay no price for being wrong." It feels very apt to those who are making the decisions of the EV tax credit bill. They just want to appear like they're making the popular decision. So let's run through the likelihood of a $40,000 tax bill using a bit of common sense and going through how it would play. Let's start by identifying the intention of the bill. Well, we could infer it as a way to keep American jobs alive by preventing the legacy autos from going under, along with transitioning to cleaner energy. So forget about creative destruction. We're aiming at keeping our corporations alive and doing what we can to pay for them to enter into a new industry as their old one is dying. That is what is happening. They've run their companies so poorly and missed the opportunities that now we're going to pay them to help get into the new industry. And we're actually possibly going to pay significantly more than their entire market capitalizations. Oh, and this industry? Well, they don't even appear to be any good at it. This is almost as arbitrary as funding them into making a search engine to compete with Google. They think their industry is to make anything with wheels. Of course, all legacy autos will eventually have a $20,000 headwind per car they make too, compared to Tesla, which is a serious disadvantage, particularly when you need to be invested in so much R&D and the product you make sells at a loss. So in this scenario, we have decided that the internal combustion industry should transition to the EV industry and help them through it with all our tax dollars and more, even if it's not something that's in their wheelhouse or works within their legacy systems. But we're going to give it a shot anyway. I mean, are they serious about transitioning? Because they show minimal signs of it, and even 50% by 2030. Well, that's not very impressive. And what are the other 50% of vehicles they plan on selling? No one is going to be buying something that's not electric, especially when you can get a Tesla with a $10,000 discount. Why would you want some antique that can't even drive itself, and is that much more likely to result in harm or even death due to them not being as safe as a Tesla? Okay, I could go on about how much better Tesla are, but we all know that anyway. Okay, so perhaps 50% by 2030 is a realistic target for them, according to their research. I mean, at this stage, I think they'll implode before 2025. They're building battery factories and teaming up with the right battery companies even. Sure, they invested in the wrong battery technology, and Tesla can produce batteries at a 10 times higher output per squared foot, and at about half the cost. But the legacy autos will be able to make some electric cars. Again, only if they lasted that long and their ICE business is still around to support them all through the transition. This is a big but. Okay, so if it was capped at $40,000, then what cars sold in the US would actually even qualify for the incentive? For GM, obviously we have Chevrolet's ugly little Bolt, starting at only $31,000. This car is made in Michigan, and GM is unionized. That means it's eligible for the full $12,500 rebate, taking it down to a price of $18,500. And remember, that's a car that costs minimal to run too, with no gas. So demand for that car might go crazy. I mean, the dealers will probably end up adding some extra commission, of course, so perhaps mid-20s, and Chevrolet may also raise the price too. Although the rebate is meant to be for the taxpayer, well, everyone wants their cut along the way too. Of course, Tesla cuts out the middleman, so no extra cut for them. And GM with the ironic electric Hummer. Well, they priced themselves out of this. I mean, they priced themselves out of the $80,000 limit too. Honestly, I have no idea what GM are thinking with this monstrosity. The brand is synonymous with the most destruction to the planet of any vehicle. Are these auto execs just total morons? Or is it just a big joke to them? The Ford Mach-E? Nope, doesn't make the cut. Starts at $43,000. Oh, but Ford could just drop the price to $3,000 and then qualify. Yes, they could, but if they lose money on this car now, then they'll lose even more if they drop it by a further $3,000. Oh, but not so fast. We have the F-150 coming in under $40,000. Well, this model is for commercial use only, but I would say it still qualifies. On the other hand, Ford also will make a loss on every sale of those. And if a car dealer has so much demand, then they'll raise the prices, then it would be over $40,000 threshold. In other words, this car has no room of margin to work within. Neither Rivian nor Lucid would qualify for under $40,000. Two US startups that may or may not have a future. But if Legacy doesn't, then who's left aside from Tesla? And yes, the Tesla Model 3 standard range, but this doesn't help Tesla in any way. They're already sold out. How will this make any difference? And that's it. As far as BEVs made in the US that qualify, pretty much just one. So does that sound like a likely scenario to you? However, there is BEV competition from overseas, and no, not China, as we know they are excluded from this bill. How about Hyundai? The Kona Electric starts at $34,000. Well, that qualifies. Well, it qualifies now, actually. You can still get $7,500 credit off a new electric Hyundai. Yet, we aren't seeing waiting lists until the end of the year. So how could a new tax credit for the same amount have any difference on the demand for this car? Particularly when there also be a tax credit available on a Tesla. Previously, they were talking about an $80,000 cap, so to cut it in half is ridiculous, especially when we see that almost all BEVs are priced well above $40,000. That is an insane amount of difference. Legacy Autos want to increase their EV prices so they can actually make some profit from these cars too. If consumers save $12,500 per car, well, Legacy can increase their prices by $5,000 to scrape in some form of profit. That may, in theory, go into R&D to improve their batteries, drivetrain, motors and software. If it's limited to $40,000, then this incentive would encourage them to reduce the cost of the car to make their BEVs eligible for the subsidy, making further losses. Yeah, this incentive, although it's for the consumer, demand will be so high, Legacy will want to simply increase their prices so they can take some of it too. If the $40,000 limit is in, then even I am shocked as to the level of cronyism. It in no way helps Legacy transition and only gives them a huge payday with PHEVs that come under $40,000. I think if this is the case, word should be spread as to boycott all their products altogether. At the end of the day, capitalism is about voting for your corporation. Every time you give them one of your dollars, it's a vote. A vote that you like their products, and a vote that you want them to stay around. If you stop voting for them, then they stop existing. What if there actually is very little demand for electric cars at all? What if it's not electric cars people even want? What if it's only really Teslas? And then just a few stubborn consumers who think they're cool to be different until they realise life is much better if you don't have to drive your car yourself. Look, even as an investor, I don't want Tesla to be a monopoly, and I don't even think Elon does either. But none of the others are coming close at this stage. Except for the Chinese, of course. They are offering great value EVs, but they aren't making profits yet, let alone the huge amount of profit we're about to see from Tesla. Remember, everyone, 2 new factories about to launch that potentially have 5 times the capacity they currently offer. Am I the only one that thinks this is a big deal? Remember, there is also the matter of the $7.5 billion EV charger budget. Hybrids don't need these. Yes, they can use them, but they can also use gas station. And it would be highly impractical to go on a road trip in a PHEV stopping at a charging station every 30 miles. In other words, this is a lot of money to spend on infrastructure for BEVs. So you may as well incentivize the BEV sales to accompany it. Look, I know governments do stupid things, but I think in this scenario, it's really unlikely they cap EVs at $40,000. The math is pretty simple. It basically has no benefit to BEVs. Thanks for listening. Please hit the thumbs up and subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter and talk to me on Patreon.